Okay, well, I'm going to get started, and our fourth moderator will return in a second. Thanks. Welcome to Salesforce Integration, Crossing the Business IT Divide. My name is Steve Mooney, and I'm Director of Strategic Partnerships for Salesforce.com, and I'm glad you can join us today. I'm happy to present and host Informatica today. They're the top independent integration company, and they're a strategic partner of Salesforce.com. Informatica does cloud data migration, data replication, data synchronization, and data integration, helps establish Salesforce as the front office cloud system of record. And what's more, as the established integration company of many of the Fortune 500, they help us work with IT more closely. I'd like this time to introduce my friend Darren Cunningham, Senior Director of Marketing for Informatica, and a longtime friend of Salesforce.com. Please welcome Darren to the podium.
Thanks, Steve. Good afternoon. I feel like I should have given you a hug, but I owe you one. All right, guys. Thanks everybody for coming. We've got actually a pretty packed session here. We've got three great customers in true Salesforce fashion. We wanted this to be about customers, how they're thinking about integration. And what's really interesting to me is some of the roles of each of these folks that are speaking today. And I'll let them get into their introductions in a second. I don't have to do the Salesforce Safe Harbor, do I? No, let's just move on. Okay. Okay, great. That's a relief. Can I, is this, if I walk away from the mic, is that good?
Turn the transmitter on and help.
That'll help. Okay. I guess you could say now I'm turned on. Okay. So, integration is, I think, it's amazing to me how much top-of-mind topic this has become. 2 or 3 years ago, you go to a Salesforce conference, I think everyone's very excited about the new features. Pop-up hovers gets huge claps, or pop-up reminders. I remember one year it was like, woohoo, pop-up reminders. But now we're thinking about really taking Salesforce to the next level in our organizations. And not surprisingly, that then leads to this conversation of integration. And we've seen a huge shift in roles coming to the conference. If you think about some of the IT representation we have here at Dreamforce this year, it's amazing. You wouldn't have seen that a few years ago. So, all the industry analyst firms talk about this. You got the guy pulling out his hair over here. 65% of IT managers recognize integration as a top barrier. Everyone's talking about security because I think it gets all the news, right? Well, security in the clouds. Oh my God, what are we going to do if something happens? I think companies like Salesforce have overcome that in terms of the investment and focus they put around security. I think the next big barrier is going to be integration, and that's what today's session is all about. How do you, as Steve said, if you've got Salesforce tightly integrated with all of your other systems, whether they're in the cloud or on-premise, you're going to get that much more value out of Salesforce, your investment in Salesforce in general. One of the Informatica customers said not too long ago, it was actually an App Exchange review, my favorite, that said, having Salesforce without integration is like having a house on a beautiful island. You can't get to it. And that's really what we want to talk about here is how we can really integrate Salesforce into everything you do in terms of data, in terms of business process, and how that'll help you get more out of that investment. So quick plug here. So Informatica, you may have heard of us. We're an enterprise company. We've been around for over 10 years, publicly traded. Very strong home in the IT organization, right? Very powerful technology for moving data, cleansing data, and making sure you have trustworthy and relevant, timely information. 3 or 4 years ago, it's actually 4 years ago now, we started partnering with Salesforce, and we built a set of very specific applications for Salesforce customers, because we recognize that the people who manage the Salesforce system aren't the people that we ever really spoke to in the past. Right? It isn't the IT developer. It isn't the IT architect. It isn't the data warehouse manager or DBA. It's often an operations person, like you're going to hear from today. It's often a CRM administrator is a title that many of you have, I'm sure, in the room. So we needed to build something different for that audience. So we built a fully multi-tenant set of purpose-built applications for the primary use cases we see Salesforce customers having. So whether it's data migration, data loading to and from Salesforce, being able to synchronize data from your back office to your front office. So a synchronization with, say, an SAP, an Oracle type of enterprise application or a database. Data replication and some data quality technology. So that's really what we've really focused on as a company. And what we're seeing now is that, and what we announced actually at Dreamforce, is that you can now take your on-premise, or whether it's run on-premise or on Amazon, your on-premise Power Center, so it's a very, the product that we're known for in the IT organization, you can now build much more complex work and publish that out to your business users as a custom cloud service. So we're really seeing integration as being the link now, helping really bridge the IT business divide, which is today's topic. I want to just understand, you hate when people do the show of hands thing, but in terms of who's in the room, how many people from this room are in the IT organization? Wow. Okay, so it's pretty big. So let me rephrase that. Who here isn't in the IT organization? I'm not. Okay. How about back here? So 2, 3. Okay. All right. So I guess what we want these guys to talk about is how you get along with half the people in the room here and how you figured that out in your company, because I think that'll be very interesting to everyone. Okay. So just finally, in terms of where we are with Informatica, and you can come by booth 509. We've got some great demos and things happening there. We're now over 500 customers are running running Informatica. Salesforce customers are running Informatica technology with their Salesforce implementation, and that's both in terms of IT companies who have very heavy investment in the data center and in the cloud. So a lot of interesting things happening here. And just in terms of our objectives for this session, I think a good session is one that gives you 2 or 3 things to take away. So we want to have you guys participate. So ask some questions. How did you guys deal with this divide in your company? Is this just a marketing guy saying something that isn't true? Help us out. So we want you to learn a few things about how they approached integration, how they thought about it in the cloud, maybe some technology on premise. How do you work with the IT who has an integration standard, and how do you avoid point solutions in your company? What's the right approach for integration? I think it's always going to depend on where you are with Salesforce, where you are as a company, and what your core competencies are. And hopefully we'll give you a couple of 2 or 3 takeaways. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to our first speaker, who is Matt Brady. Matt, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, hi. I'm Matt Brady. I'm the Director of Sales Automation for TransUnion. So we are part of the Sales Operations Group, which is part of sales, which is part of our North American business. And so my comments today will be on Salesforce and Informatica as it relates to TransUnion, which is a global company, but we focus, because of the nature of the North American market, exclusively in that region. So it's not to say that in any way we couldn't do our work globally, but just that we have that purview. So TransUnion is a global leader in information management. We have 30 years of technical and thought leadership experience. And so we're based in Chicago, but have people around the country and around the world. Financial services space, 2,500 employees, 550 of which are on Salesforce.com at this point. We also, I just realized during this conference, we just exceeded that number with customer portal and partner portal licenses. So we are now supporting more people outside the employ of TransUnion than within, which is kind of a neat milestone for us, having used Salesforce for 4 years and Informatica for over 1 year. We're using all the aspects of Salesforce that we can get access to. So we're an unlimited edition customer at this point, and the only thing that we haven't really tackled is knowledge, and I see it as a sweet spot for us in the next year. So I'm going to use some pictures to tell a story about one major problem we were trying to solve in TransUnion. We try within my group in sales automation to provide sales and service representatives with a 360-degree view of the customer. And to that end, we have, over the last few years, been focused very exclusively on CRM. Now what we're doing is CRM Plus, and it's, for lack of a better word, extending the same benefits of sales and service efficiency and effectiveness into the back office. And as such, integrating our CRM system of record with back office systems, including billing systems, HR systems, payroll, provisioning, et cetera, is now the task at hand. And that was why a year ago we went to Informatica, a company that we have had a long relationship with as a heavy IT company. And by the way, I have a technical background. So I was in TransUnion's IT department for 7 years and have about that much experience outside of TransUnion and other large organizations. So I'm coming from this as a techie. I finished business school and wanted to do something outside of IT, so I jumped into sales and now, of all things, have the most technical role I've ever had, because Salesforce is so deep and so wide in Apex and Visualforce and all the rest. And I can't really say the same about Informatica. It doesn't require the same level of tooling and horsepower on the PC. It really is a service that over here, and this morning I was working on Informatica feeds because I can and because we need to be that responsive to our business. And so back to the picture. This is a picture of virtually any integration, but it's one that speaks to where we were at within TransUnion. So first of all, the CRM system. It's owned by the business, Salesforce.com. We gave our CRM a brand name internally, so we call it InTouch. And it's been really convenient for us to do that because it's not known as Salesforce.com. It's Salesforce.com plus Informatica for those people who know about it, plus ClickTools, plus you name it. And so that's one takeaway, not really on point, but that it's very handy to have a scalable kind of notion of what your CRM solution is or your system of record. And so the system of record, CRM, which is Salesforce, et cetera, is owned by the business. IT owns all the ETL technology. So one of the major databases we were going after was the billing system. They also own the infrastructure, which is Informatica Power Center Connect something. Power Exchange, thank you, Power. It's got a lot of power, I hear. And it, frankly, it's not all that important to me. I know TransUnion's IT team picks best-in-class technologies, and that's one of them. And we just needed data out of the systems. And so I like to keep it that simple, right? We don't need to understand what transformations are and the ETL means and all the rest. What we did know is that we were both working on the data in the middle. So we were kind of colliding when it came to, okay, we're reaching pretty far in to get files emailed to us and FTP to us, and they're doing a lot of things trying to insert data into Salesforce and using web services APIs, and there was a lot of just collision occurring in that middle tier, if you will. And so we needed to move forward from that. So that's sort of the backdrop on why we went with Informatica Cloud Services. And I may say IOD or Informatica On Demand. I mean basically the cloud-based solution from Informatica. And specifically, it's the synchronization service that we're working with. Okay, so extending on this picture of the billing system. So Salesforce.com has a notion of the customer. We knew that we needed a technology that would allow us to stay customer-centric. So whatever web service API or data loading technology, our focus has to remain on allowing our sales representatives, service representatives to be customer-centric. So anything that takes us away and requires us to get, learn new languages or more acronyms is a diversion from that focus. The billing team has a proprietary system that they have built and managed, and it is the system that integrates with our customers transactionally. So every time someone pulls a credit report or a credit score or any other sort of monitoring service from TransUnion, our billing system knows about that so that they can do receivables. What needed to happen was that the billing data needed to show up in Salesforce for the following reason. Our sales reps need to know what's happening with the accounts that they're responsible for managing. And very specifically, we wanted them to know within a given month and for a year past, what has the trend been in actuals. So the data was in Lotus Notes, and they got very used to the Lotus Notes way of doing things, which is to say you can drill down, you can sort of pivot things, and it's, for better or for worse, Lotus Notes was the system that really served their needs for many years. That said, we had an interesting kind of twofold problem. One, we had to get a lot of data into Salesforce. We had to do it quickly, and then we needed to present that data in a manner that's consumable, because you can just dump a lot of aggregate data. I think we're dealing with hundreds of thousands of records per week that we load this. And so that was the problem at hand. Okay, everybody okay with this? Any quick questions? Did I skip anything? Or, okay, tell me if I use a phrase that's not well understood here. So the solution. So we went with Informatica Cloud Services, and we did so for a couple of reasons. One, our IT team thinks very highly of Informatica. Two, they actually brought the cloud services offering to us and said, listen, we're going to do this as part of a bigger deal, and I'll tell you that that bigger deal never got funded. And so late last year, we were getting close to the close a business, and IT said, we can't get our six-figure funding. Budget is tight. And we said, listen, we'll take cloud services out of that bigger deal, and we'll just negotiate that and close that ourselves. So we created a relationship with our account manager from Informatica, and it was exclusively the subscription service. So the business has now a relationship with Informatica, and I am the lead user, and I have two colleagues who are also users. And we had a trial. We logged in, figured out that it was easy to do, and now we administer this thing left and right. We also administer Salesforce, so we've got plenty of technical depth, but what we don't have are the timelines or the change management that is typical in IT. So our sense was and still is that IT is dealing with enterprise-level initiatives, whether it be compliance needs or SOX or upgrading to IP6 or what have you, e-commerce initiatives. And so moving data back and forth between systems was just not something that they were solely positioned to do. They're a key component in that, and I'll talk a little bit about how we do that right now. So a couple things, and I'm going to refer to my notes because we've got quite a bit of sort of stuff happening behind the scenes here. So Salesforce.com, some infrastructure, and billing and HR. Okay, great. So that's the landscape. But what we're actually doing to make this happen efficiently is that we take 7 loads of data out of Salesforce and drop them into what becomes the Informatica proper infrastructure. So I'll say a little bit more about that. Accounts, contacts, opportunities, users, and a half a dozen other tables we pull down out of Salesforce on a nightly basis so that we have all the reference information landed locally. It's our a shared drive where we drop CSV files. And then from there, the Informatica, and we use Informatica Cloud Services to do that. It's very straightforward, and and then we just manage that. Then the IT team takes those reference tables and they cross-reference all of the foreign keys. So instead of getting data that says sales rep Matt Brady in account Joe's auto dealer, it's foreign key for user X, foreign key for customer Y or account Y. And then all those foreign keys, those 15 or 18-digit character sets, then become foreign keys in our one custom object that we load data into called billing data. Okay? So that's a technique that I would highly recommend. What we found is that we were doing a lot of gyrations, and we would actually take the data out of Informatica, load it into Access, so that we could do all those lookups. And we realized, wait a minute, this is just not the way to do it. Now, a quick note, because at dinner the other night we realized, all right, even loading data down and landing it so that we can do cross-reference to load it back, that's not the state of the art. So next year we'll talk about how we don't land data at all, and it's just done through foreign key lookups through web services or through the Informatica sort of wonder solution, which it's quickly becoming. But anyway, one other comment about loading data into Salesforce, and this is a buzzword that I think will actually become very real to you if it isn't already. We're doing upsert. Who is familiar with upsert? Okay, so that's a good learning for y'all. Is that an upsert is a update unless it's an insert. Okay, so it looks for the record on what hopefully is an indexed field. If it finds it, it will just update the data, right? If there is no record that exists with that key, then it will create one. Okay, so that's a great technique because now in one fell swoop, typically we would have to determine what records are in there, update those, and then insert the rest. Now we just do one command that sort of says, listen, make this happen, and tell us where records fall out or when it's done. And so that's the process. And by the way, I should say, the other reason, I talked a lot about why we chose Informatica Cloud Services. What I failed to mention is that our information security department wasn't interested in the fact that we had a long-term relationship with Informatica, nor were they interested in the fact that it's Informatica. I said, well, listen, it's like Cisco or IBM, right? And they said, yeah, Cisco and IBM, we deal with things that come up with those guys all the time. So I said, okay, fine, I can't use that line. So they had to vet Informatica the way they would vet any vendor. And so it took us a little longer to make the decision. But the good news is that our group, at least, felt that it was a robust solution. And I can go into that in Q&A, and we can talk a bit more about the architecture behind the scenes, or I'll let the Informatica team talk to that. But I can tell you this, one, I'm generally familiar with it, and two, our information security team looked at every aspect of who owns the servers, who has access, all the rest. So that is something that we were very cognizant of, and we got through. So the results. Most importantly, we reduced our dependency on Lotus Notes. And it's sort of this house of cards situation, but Lotus Notes is not strategic. The version of Domino we're on is unsupported. It is tough to build an IP6 network with Lotus Notes. There's all these sort of chain reaction things, which, again, on the IT side, that's just a normal course of business, is dealing with complexity and managing for business results in that environment. And so good news is we're further from Notes than ever before. Second, we keep this notion of 360-degree view of the customer, so that a sales and support rep, and if you've heard anything about TransUnion at Dreamforce, it's that sales and support are done more and more together, right? We have this sort of hybrid model of, someone picks up the phone, takes a call, or they get a screen pop, answer a call, and upsell them in the process, so it becomes a commission event instead of just a case that needs to be closed. And having that billing data allows the rep to see, and then us to do marketing campaign optimization to say, listen, let's only sell to customers who aren't enabled for a product, or who haven't bought it lately, or who are trending downward. So there's all these sort of business intelligence or business insights that come out of this one feed, which we built on our own and tested, and had IT obviously land the core data for us, but otherwise haven't had to wait for the moratorium, which starts November 15th and lasts until January 15th. We'll do 2 major releases in those 2 months. And lastly, and I wanted to talk a bit about the user interface, we have multiple reports and a custom summary page. So what that means is that these are just screenshots of the Salesforce reports. Those are not sophisticated. They're going to get better, I'm glad to hear, with the enhancements coming next year. But one thing that we did do is we built a Visualforce page. So if you're familiar, if you've seen Visualforce implemented or have done so, would you raise your hand just to get a sense of, okay, so again, this is a great opportunity to use 2 things. Analytic snapshots behind the scenes to aggregate data. We're actually aggregating it in advance. So our ETL team is sort of rolling up that data for us, so that we can take aggregate level information and not have to compute a million records when the CEO of the company runs a report on billing data. But we can also use Salesforce reports to do that, to slice across a number of dimensions. The other thing that we're doing, though, is we use Apex, which is the programming language, and then Visualforce, the display technology, and we create one sort of matrixed view of per product and per month, what's sort of the run rate, and it's a real rich, kind of dense view. And we paid an outside firm called Aperio to do that work. We kind of spec'd it out. They built it. We tested it with a couple lead business units, and now that's launched. So that's our means of not just getting this massive data, but making it very actionable, so that on the account record, there's a link that brings them to these reports, or this sort of matrix consolidated view that shows them in one quick view what's going on with this customer, so that as they take a support call or make a sales call, they can do both of those things. Here it is. If it's too small to read, that's what's going on. It's sort of per product and across a number of time frames, and then, of course, totals and run rates and things like that. Okay, so a couple lessons learned. Plan before you do it, and once you do it, check it to make sure it's right. When you're talking about this amount of data, you've got to validate that you're not dropping data or transposing things. It's not typical of Informatica, but it's just human error. So measure first, measure twice, cut once. Focus on the information that they need. Salesforce, it's easy to focus on efficiencies, but there's a huge opportunity for effectiveness on getting the right data into the sales users' hands. And then, celebrate the wins. So as you see efficiencies, communicate those upward. I'd say whether it's a technical or a business audience, set out to accomplish certain goals, and when you reach them, and my team, with 12 releases a year, reaches these goals and celebrates very frequently, and I would just encourage you to celebrate those things internally, because there are a lot of successes to be had with these options here. Paul?
Thanks, Matt. Hi, I'm I'm Paul Stevenson. I'm with Amera Group. I run marketing operations, and Matt had been alluding to me. This is my first opportunity to ever address a room with like half the people from the IT department. I don't even see our IT people that often. But thanks for joining us. It's an exciting thing to be at Dreamforce. I don't know. I hope you guys are having a great time, but I just love it. A little on my background. I spent 2 years. I'm not totally without any background in computers, but I spent 2 years in electrical engineering school at the University of Texas and got accepted into the Macomb School of Business. It's the #1 accounting school in the country, and so what can I say? I'm a CPA. But all my life, I've really wanted to be a developer, and so in a sense, I've lived as a developer in the body of a CPA, and now I can live my dream, And I've really been having a lot of fun. It's great. So it's an interesting subject because this thing really kind of passed us very quickly. That whole IOD thing, it was easy for us to do. And I'll give you a little talk through about it and then let you ask some questions if you have any. But our company is a big HMO. Well, we're a small HMO, but we're a big company. Big HMOs have 20 million members. We have 2 million. We have 1.8 million members. About $5.5 billion is our annual revenue now. We have had an amazing run. As you can imagine, economies go this way and Medicaid goes that way. So we've been just really growing very rapidly. But we've also had a lot of cost pressure, and we've been able, using the Force platform and the IOD implementation, we've been able to reduce our marketing expenses in the last 3 years by 40%, and at the same time increase our same-store growth in the teens in 3 years at CAGR. So that being said, we have been faced with a number of challenges over the last couple of years, and I'll give you a little sense of a little bit about our scenarios. We're an insurance company. We get $5.5 billion a year, and we pay out $5.4 billion a year. So our guys are really, it's a big accounting shop, right? We write checks all day long. And so our core focus is to run the facet system, which means making sure that the contracts with the doctors are loaded in the system right so that the thing cranks out the right payment, making sure you get all the claims in, they're clean, and get them out. That's what those guys do. And so they don't have a lot of time to focus on important but ancillary services like marketing. We have 3 marketing operations. One is our Medicare marketing, which is a CMS program and has its own rules. Medicaid, which we're in 10 states, 14 different plans, major urban areas. And we have 10 sets of rules there. And then we also have another sales function, which is our provider relations, where we go out and actually, it's not really sales, but we sell contracts to providers at low prices. And that's why they're resistant. So we treat it like a sales activity. Anyway, the situation is that because the system is so key to the entire function of a company, it's highly guarded. And I'm sure that you guys are often maybe sitting in rooms and playing that role of saying, no, you're not modifying the core system to do whatever. And so as a result, we didn't have a way to really do the kinds of things we needed to do to ensure our success on the marketing side. So to give you a sense of our major problem, and that's what I say, there are no way to manage our retention campaigns. We have a churn in the Medicaid business of about 60% a year. So I'm looking at, depending on my plan, between losing 5 and sometimes 10% of our members in total every single month. It's an amazing thing. And so we have to get out there, make sure our members know that they need to recertify or sign up again for Medicaid, and send that paperwork in, or we lose premium revenue. So it is a very mission critical part of our business, and it's a lot of money. I mean, if I can move our retention rate 1 basis point, it's in the millions of dollars. It's just amazing. So among our challenges then are that I mentioned we have a need for a marketing database that allows us to do things like contact our members. Our biggest program is our retention outreach program, where we send mail, and we also do automated outbound calling with a tool called ELIZA, which is a very sophisticated IVR. And that is a 1.4 million phone calls a year program. And we didn't have a way to hang those calls on the member record and know that we made that call and so forth. We've taken it far beyond that, but now we can do that. To accomplish that, we, as I mentioned, we have middle IT support. Darren already mentioned, or I'm sorry, Matt mentioned Power Center. We are a Power Center client, and that kind of paved our way, kind of the way that you had said, in the sense that when we came to the need for a tool to integrate with Salesforce, we looked at Power Center Connector, actually, which is some deal that connects to Power Center and lets you pipeline right into Salesforce. But that was a little too expensive for our needs. And we looked at web services, but that's complicated, requires a lot of maintenance, and it also requires cracking open the core system and letting us stick our head in, and that was not going to work. And so the last choice, and then the last thing we had as a challenge was we needed to do data replication. Besides bringing the data into Salesforce, which in our case is our member data, we have a lot of activity data. We actually run 75,000 campaigns, events per year. We do grassroots campaign marketing. And so we have all that data, and now we brought our member data together. And what we wanted to do was push that into a BI environment so that we could do real heavy lifting stuff like, how many events did I have in a zip code and how many members did I gain in a zip code. And that's not the sort of thing that Salesforce can, really serve us. And so we had that last piece was to take to have a BI environment. So with all that being in our needs, we as I said, chose Informatica. It was a simple decision for us, really. We looked at a few other tools, but as I said, the IT guys liked it. We had the opportunity to trial it. We were supported during that trial by their team, and who did a great job, and sold us on it. It works great. We do a weekly there's that word, upsert. We do a weekly upsert of our member data, so we get we actually push our data into a table that is created by the IT guys, and then we pull it out of a table. It lets us do a little bit more stuff than if you push it into a CS3 flat file. We manage the replication similarly on a weekly basis. We push it out to our it's a SQL environment, and then we also do a lot of other stuff with it. I mean, you're always having projects going on. We get lists from our clients who are the states of various members who need some kind of communications and so forth. We can push those in with IOD, hang an activity on the member record, and then run the campaign from there. And then and down the road, we're also looking at an integration with our mail system. We have an in-house contract with Rico to provide all of our mail services, and we're looking at how to integrate that so that we can start to gather return mail data and so forth, that address, and push that back into our thing. Again, we have a great opportunity because in the Salesforce environment, we have more flexibility. For instance, we have a lot of other phone numbers for our members that we get from various places. We have to use an official phone number in our core system because the state is the provider of that number, and they want us to have that. But for our purposes, we want to actually use the ones that they answer. So we have all that stuff in our database. It's really a great way to go. So we've solved that, and then we're heading towards the mail system. And then the other thing is we have a lot of databases in our local plans. For instance, our local plans have objectives within their contract. New York's a great example where we get paid a certain rate for a member, but we get paid much less, like a 40% rate, if the member has never used the service. Okay, so it's a deal like this. And so when we're calling these members to get them to recertify for their program, if I've got that person on the phone and I can say, hey, you need to go see the doctor, their revenue doubles. Okay, so it's a direct impact. And so what we're looking at is how we can integrate with other care management databases to bring more data in, present that to our reps. when they're working with the client or with the members, and create more opportunity there. And IOD is a great way to go with it. I know that I won't have any headaches. I actually don't do the technical stuff, the whole developer and CPA thing. I don't really do it. I have a team. We have a chief who is our chief administrator, and he has developed himself now in the last really 20 months or so into a full-blown Apex developer. We do visual force. We do a lot of sophisticated Apex coding. And so I've got him, and then I've got two other administrators who manage the other two sales activities that we have, our Medicare guy and our PR guy. So anyway, our results were that it was an efficient process. I get an email every Monday. It says the data has been there. It comes from the core system, and then I asked Jay, make sure that he ran the integration. The next thing we're going to do is actually start scheduling it, which is sort of, we've been running it now for 4 months or so, and so now it's time to actually just put it down and let it run on its own. We used ETL to avoid delays. One example of that was our file came through, our table came through originally. The dates were in the wrong format in certain cases, and I could have gone through that lovely 6 or 8 week process we call CNR. And I don't know if that's like a normal IT name for it, but it's change something. And all I know is it takes a long time, and if you just want to change one piece of data. So we just said, well, leave it there, and we'll fix it. And it worked great. And then another example is that it allowed a rapid deployment of our new call center. So we had I don't want to pick on IT guys, but they had been kind of dragging their feet for a long time to create our table. And about July, we decided that we were really going to need to do something new. And what it was to open up a call center to handle inbound calls for actually what the thing I had mentioned earlier. We have Eliza calling 1.4 million. They're actually households, they're not members. And then now our call ends, and she says, if you'd like to ask, somebody, if you'd like to speak to a live agent, you have some other questions, press 1. And so now they roll to our inbound call center, and these folks can help them deal with their specific questions about recertification. What we've seen with this is just a tremendous bump in our recertification rates. It's been a great thing. We did that in 2 months. And the call center, the need to do it was actually what got the guys to get the table. And then once we had the table, we were able to push it up with IOD, and in a couple of weeks of testing, we were live. So I don't know if I have another slide or if it's... Oh, I have one more. Okay, lessons learned. The lesson that we learned is that the solution was to extend the attributes in a flexible environment where we can really work. I mean, if I have something that drops off on a cliff, like I'm using a marketing strategy, and your click-through or something goes, you got to change. That's the reality of marketing. You can't sit around and say, oh, this will be great for the next 5 years. So we had to have an environment that was flexible, and that's the Force platform. And now this allows us to extend the attributes of our core system without touching our core system, and that makes our IT guys happy. So it's really been a success. Don't wait too long, because you're going to have incremental process. The beauty of Salesforce is that you're working in this sort of an incremental environment. What we started with 18 months ago on the platform was a basic system, and now we have 5 applications, about 5 roles, really individual, totally different kinds of jobs, and oh, that's just Medicaid. That's not the other 2 services. And so we have all kinds of stuff going on. Just start, get going, and add to it, and you'll do great. You can't anticipate everything that's out there, and you won't know what problem you'll run into until you run into it and then deal with it. If you have a sandbox environment, best way to go. Find out in a dead environment rather than a live one. Know your data. That's where you've got to really, that's the IT divide thing. I was trying to think of what my angle was going to be on that, but I think that the real issue is that you've got to work with your IT folks, and you folks have to work with your business owners, of course, to make sure that people understand what really lives in those fields, what that data really is. And that's a hard part. It's hard for the IT folks to know because that's not always their job to, create the data. They manage it. But that's key to being successful in any kind of integration. And then the last thing is accept limitations. I mean, sometimes you just have to say, oh boy, what are we really going to get after that next year? And put it on the back burner, because if you don't, you won't get your job done. That's all I have.
These are definitely great use cases so far. The next one we're going to talk about, I'm Dan Marioni. I work at Morgan Stanley Smith Barney. I run a group of business side admins, I guess, for more better description of what we do. We have about 2,200 Salesforce users right now that are our branch managers and support staffs in the field. So the primary use case around what we do is we have our branch managers are tasked with recruiting experienced financial advisors. And in doing so, all the processes, and the entire thing is treated like a sales process. So everything goes in the Salesforce. Everyone's accountability is in Salesforce. You log your activity. You get the help and support that you need in bringing a person on board. The books of business are reviewed within Salesforce from the various different groups: compliance, registration, risk, etc. So a little bit of backdrop about the use case that we're doing here. Morgan Stanley and Smith Barney merged on June 1st of this year. And I was tasked to basically get our Salesforce application accessible to the Smith Barney branch managers and their teams on day one, because the business did not want to lose any kind of momentum or they didn't want to have a disruption in basically the continuity of recruiting. So with recruiting, you're bringing over assets, and assets, you generate revenue off of the assets. It's one of the critical functions of the firm. So getting everyone on the same platform on day one was pretty critical for us. There was another Smith Barney Salesforce org that these branch managers were currently logging all of their recruiting information in. So the task at hand was to migrate that Smith Barney legacy data into a single platform, get those users up and running, and retrain everyone on the more or less the legacy Morgan Stanley recruiting process. So to scope that, it was about 1,600 users that we brought over, about 25,000 records, 10,000 activities, 5,000 documents. I'm using big round numbers. They're not very big comparably, but it's more than enough that we had in the Smith Barney Salesforce org that needed to come over to the Morgan org. Like I said, this was something that needed to happen on day one of the joint venture. So we looked at different use cases, and we looked at different options of how we were going to do this. So we know we have Informatica in-house. It's a big group, and they do a lot of work. But like I think Matt had mentioned before, the Informatica teams are used for bigger things. They're not used for 25,000 records in a one-shot deal. They're used for migrating thousands of client records back and forth on a daily basis. So to get something prioritized, even though we are a critical function, that was challenging. So then we looked to say, well, how could we do it tactically? We could burn, one of the options was to just burn stuff to a disk and pack route it over to our org and then fire it up. That seemed like not a fun option. We could do nothing. We could say, okay, well, resources aren't really available. Let's wait and prioritize this later on down the road. But that was not part of the business plan to do that. They wouldn't have that. They wanted it on day one. So we had to deliver on day one. So we thought about migrating directly org to org using Informatica on demand. But even actually before we get to that, I guess you all know what we chose, but we thought about using Salesforce to Salesforce as an option. There were just too many records to map. The batching process to map those records over just wasn't part of the use case that we wanted to look at. Other challenges that we had is, we could have used Data Loader, and we could have, pulled everything down, maybe put in this SQL Server, and then pushed it back up in the Salesforce. But we didn't have a SQL Server available to us. We certainly didn't want to use Access. So that pretty much made Informatica on Demand probably one of the only solutions that we were looking at. We were active, users of it. We understood how to use it. So we chose it. And how we did it. So let's talk about the implementation for it. It's probably not it's not difficult. We basically took the Salesforce user IDs from the legacy Smith-Barney records and made them external keys on the existing records in our Morgan Salesforce implementation. We assign each one of those users. We set up the users. We assign them their roles. We assign them to branches, which are our accounts object. And then we basically configured Informatica on demand to perform an insert sync task. I think you guys were mentioned before that, thinking that you pull data down and then do the transformation, push it back up. This is a sample of a real-time one where we basically had real-time lookups happen against the foreign key, the legacy Smith-Barney key, to look up basically the correct user ID to assign the owner on the insert record when it got into the Morgan Stanley org. This was all happening, obviously, in real time. So from execution to production, 1 day. I mean, it was just, get your mappings done, do some test records, punch the button, and wait as it churned through. So it took all in all 1 day. The resource savings are the big benefit here. We could do it ourselves. So think of a mantra: if the business can do it, the business should do it. It's a fine line. I know there's a lot of gray areas there, but you as all technical people probably don't want to be mired down in things that the business can do, and likewise. And they don't appreciate having to rely on technology if they can do it themselves. So it's a yin and yang kind of thing. But we were able to get it done on our side without having to rely on several different teams. So from a cost savings perspective, it's huge. From an efficiency perspective, that's huge too. And finally, we achieved our business test. So it made my boss happy to say we are up and running on a consolidated platform. All the data is intact. Recruiting continuity is going on. There's been no disruption. Lessons learned, and I think these are really basic. We honestly just went through a field mapping exercise. What are we bringing over, and how does it translate into our existing records? What kind of transformations do we need to do? We ran a couple of test scenarios to validate our sync test once we built out the mappings and the processes to do that. And we brought over the foreign keys from the legacy Smith-Barney records for a couple of things. One is obviously to do the transformation on the lookup, and also to help us when we were doing our spot QA checking. So we could say, okay, this record came over on the insert. It's got this ID. Let me go into the Smith-Barney org and confirm that the information is consistent with what it is. So that's pretty much what we did.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan. So I'm going to call a little bit of an audible here. I want you guys to have some time for questions because it's a great set of use cases here. But I want to bring up our head of product management, Ron Lunassen, to actually show you what we're talking about here. Who here has not seen Informatica Cloud Services, Informatica On Demand? There's quite a lot of people. So I just want to show you a use case of, or Ron will show you, a synchronization of Oracle and Salesforce. So that's a very common use case for us. And that, I think, will help you maybe ask some other questions to both Ron and to the folks on the panel. Sound good? All right. So we'll move out of PowerPoint. Woohoo. Over to you, Ron.
Great. Thank you, Darren. Let me make sure I got the URL right. Hold on. Okay, so as Darren mentioned, what I'll actually show you is the live product. So what you see here, I just brought up a web browser. And what I'll be demoing is the Informatica Cloud Services. So what I'm going to do here is log in with my demo account. As you can see, this is a live demo. All right, great. Okay, so what I'm going to do is go to the Cloud Services area. Now, Informatica Cloud actually has a whole host of different services available. Now, I'm going to focus on the data synchronization service. That's the service that the folks behind me actually use in their production environments. So to do that, I simply click on the New button, and what pops up is a simple 6-step wizard to perform bidirectional integration with Salesforce. So what I'm actually going to do here in 2 minutes is integrate Oracle with Salesforce. So step 1, I'm simply going to give it a name, and I can choose the operation. So as these guys mentioned, upsert is definitely something that I could leverage. So insert, update, delete, upsert, all those things are available to me. Now I'm simply going to choose insert. Move to step 2, and this is where I identify my source. So I'm going to move Oracle data into Salesforce. So I simply go off and choose my connections. I have a whole host of connections available to me. And I'm simply going to choose my Oracle ERP system. Now this is a live database that's actually running at Informatica right now. And what you'll see is I have a full list of all the tables available to me. And I'm simply going to choose the account data table. The account data table. And you see we'll do a live preview of the actual data. So these are the rows that I'm actually going to move into my Salesforce org. Okay. Now I simply go to step 3, and this is where I'm going to go and choose my demo org. And what we're doing is we're connecting with my credentials, and I'll actually see all of the Salesforce objects, including custom objects. So we see all those out there, any of the _ C's that are there available to me. I'm simply going to choose the account object. Step 4 is an optional step where I can actually go off and filter the data. So maybe I don't want to pull over all of the data across, right? I can go and say, you know, I'm going to go and choose maybe I only want to move over the US data. So country equals USA. Right, now I'm going to get to the cool part. Step 5, the field mapping. So this is where we actually link everything together. By default, anything that matches by name is automatically linked, right? So highlight on one side, it highlights on the other. For things that don't match by name, for instance, name, drag and drop account name to name. There you go. More interestingly, billing street is actually made up of not just billing street, but street and street 2. But I can actually drag street 2 on there, and you see we're actually performing a concat. So this is not just a data loading utility. This is a true integration solution. And if I actually drill into that, I can actually do whatever business rules I need to do and apply to the data as it's moving into Salesforce. So if you know Excel, you should be able to use Informatica On Demand or the Informatica Cloud Services to transform the data so it's in the form that Salesforce needs it when it gets loaded in. And then lastly, we do have a built-in scheduler. So not only can you go off and design real-time how these mappings are going to occur, you can actually go off and say, okay, great, I've got the Oracle to Salesforce thing built. Now, how often do I want to keep the data in sync? I can run it every few minutes, hourly. You can choose whatever schedule you want. You can create your own schedules. Right, maybe I want to run it just on the weekend, whatever you want. So I simply hit save, and I'm actually going to go ahead and run this thing. And what we'll see is we're brought to a monitoring screen. So not only do I have the design environment built within the cloud, available on the web, I can actually check the status of these things as they're going on. So again, if you have this running as a nightly process, you can actually go and check from any computer in the world. Maybe you're at dinner and you're wondering, did that thing actually run? Break out your iPhone, check it out, you'll actually see it. And not only that, we'll actually email you based off success and failure as well. So if the thing's running on a nightly basis.
Who wants to have dinner with Ron tonight?
I'll demo the whole thing for you on my iPhone if you do. But that's it. It's a full functional integration solution. As you saw, in literally, I think it was 4 minutes, I was able to move real Oracle data into Salesforce. So you can get some very powerful things done very, very quickly with our solution.
So let's take some questions. There's, I think, two types of questions, right? There's the Ron product questions that don't go away. And then there's some questions for the panelists here, for the presenters. You know, maybe it's around how did you work with the IT group? How is that going now? If you want to dig into that, why don't we start here?
Sure. What provision do you have today to handle data integrity in the sense of duplicates?
So the question was about how do we, what provisions do we have around data integrity and the ability to handle duplicates? I'm going to ask all the product questions to go right to my man Ron. He'll take it away.
So there's a couple techniques. One is, I'd say the upsert functionality is probably the best way to deal with that. If you have a mechanism to determine a key value, you can create something in Salesforce called an external ID and let Salesforce figure it out. It checks to see does the thing exist or not. If it does exist, it performs an update automatically, so you're not creating duplicates. If it doesn't exist, it'll create the insert. We also have some lookup capabilities and things like that, where if you don't necessarily have a single key, you can define what fields you want to use to match, check to see if it's there. If it's there, go do the load, do the update.
Okay.
One second, let me get you the microphone.
Oh, thanks, Steve.
My question's with SAP. Do you go reach into the SAP Business Warehouse by chance? Could we schedule something that has a BW query as the source?
SAP BW.
I'll have to check specifically on the BW side, but we do have multiple ways that we can connect to SAP. Let's definitely take it offline. I'm not an SAP person, so I'll say yes for now, and then let's talk about it later.
What a number of our customers use the cloud services to move data, to replicate data down into more of a data warehousing, maybe it's BW or some other like structure, so they can put their business objects or Cognos, business intelligence tools on top. That's a pretty common use case in our larger accounts. Any additions from you guys on that topic?
Well,
okay.
We do.
All right.
That is what we do. Push it into a SQL environment and do our analysis.
The historical, trending, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Okay. I have a question for you guys, for the three presenters. What did it take for you to realize that integration was going to be critical to Salesforce success? A lot of people we talk to say, I'm going to put off integration. We'll do that later. Salesforce is so easy to get up and running. We'll worry about that downstream. What did it take for you guys? Did you know it when you implemented Salesforce? Is anyone here not yet up on Salesforce? Any people just thinking about moving? Okay, so there's some people that are just early stages. Lessons learned there?
I can say for us, again, the need to move away from Lotus Notes completely to eradicate that from the IT portfolio was a key aspect of the integration in the example that I gave. But the other systems that we're considering integrations with or that we're planning, whether it be PeopleSoft or some other system of record that won't go away, is simply that we can't wait any longer to not have visibility across the various systems that constitute our platform for doing business. So, AR data, expired pricing contracts, accounts that go into receivables. All those things are into collections. Those are all just fundamentals at this point that they're expected of us. And so in the next year, we'll integrate all those systems.
Lotus Notes isn't getting a lot of love at this conference. Dan?
Yeah, I think I'll echo that sentiment. I know Salesforce fits a specific use case for us, but the reality is there's already existing systems that do other functions. So we need to tie back to our learning management system Plateau. We need to tie back to HR PeopleSoft. We need to tie back to our FA compensation systems, and it needs to be bi-directional flow. So that's just a reality of it.
Great. Yeah. Question here.
On this topic of ownership, has the topic been approached, or is there interest from, say, the IT organization in taking ownership of either Salesforce.com or the Informatica on-demand product back into the IT organization?
Or are they more than happy to have you guys run it yourselves?
We have been dealing with that, at the enterprise level because we've had a lot of success with Salesforce, and as in my role, I've been trying to, as I was talking about, trying to gather all of these member touches that are going on in our operation. Our health plan send people letters about an ER visit they had, and we don't capture that stuff in this extended attributes database I was talking about. So we are looking at how we can use the platform, in more places. And so we're talking about how to structure that. Right now, all we've done is move the budget over there, and we're using them as a blunt object in our pending negotiation with Salesforce.com to get a new contract. But they aren't going to run Salesforce. It's sort of like don't you guys feel silly now? All that time you spent in IT school and Now you can, integrate with Oracle. It's really, it's just so simple. I don't think that they would think it would be worthwhile to have a guy, assigned to it rather than have the business owner do it. We know more about the data than they do. So really, if you know about the data, then you can do the map. And if you can do the map, Ron just showed you, you're done.
Matt?
Yeah, I've just got some thoughts on the fact that, for me, it was a lot about the brackets sort of overlapping and then kind of, settling nicely again one with the other, so that the business and the IT groups were working more in tandem. I really see that kind of shifting in that what we're finding even with the project that I referenced is that there are new challenges that have emerged in the integration. So there are changes in either the Salesforce system of record or in the needs of the business to bring that data in. And so I see the whole thing sort of shifting on its side. And what I see happening is that the sales group is well positioned to know the requirements and the needs, sort of the front-end analysis, if you will. And the IT team is well positioned to do the complex data transformations and the sort of the work that is just not relevant per se to my user. So an example would be, we have to understand what territory transfers mean to our sales and our service reps, right? When a new book of business is created at the new fiscal year. IT is not interested in that per se. On the other hand, IT, I am not well positioned to do substrings and cross-references and sophisticated algorithmic processing on the data. And they're great at that. And they have the tools with the Informatica Power stuff, Power Center, that, and I see it shifting that way where IOD and the cloud services become sort of the analyst studio, if you will, and the Informatica Power Center and other infrastructure become that sort of enterprise class means of really managing data long term. So I think it's going to continue to be a richer relationship. We work on, a question of ownership, we work more with them now than we did when we took that little deal out of the big deal and sort of went our own way.
Interesting. And by the way, from an Informatica perspective, we just announced our cloud platform capabilities. So if you have our Power Center on premise, very powerful product, power, you can actually build some of those custom mappings, custom transformations, more complex things that a business user would ever want to build, and then publish those up as a custom cloud service. So our goal is to continue this building of the bridge between IT and the business, making sure that there's shared metadata, shared services across each, and the right interface, the right tools are available to the right audiences. So I think we're at the edge of our time. Maybe one more question. And then I think our presenters will stick around for a few others. But let's take one more question before everyone flows out.
Yeah, I saw in one of those slides about 360-degree view of customer. And my question is more towards what kind of challenges you faced in implementing them. I mean, in a way, Salesforce implementation integration can happen, but it has dependencies on all these other factors, where, again, the ownership comes into picture, right? So one unit owns this, and the rest of the IT owns the rest of the systems. And talking about the data, you don't get the right data if you can't. So that's one of the challenges that, the whole business IT divide happens. Do you face any challenges there?
Any guys want to take that?
I'll just speak very quickly to it. A concrete example, CA Unicenter is our system of record for the deep help desk, where we might have 1,000 phone calls in a year, just making that number up, but it's easy to assume that a large customer of TransUnion might call us 1,000 times across their different branches and business units. We want to integrate that data in with Salesforce to the account record, but our question is, how do we make that meaningful data? Right? Do we put 1,000 tasks on the account that show that they've called every time and what the details are? Do we put a metric, a roll-up summary field that says 1,000 calls in the last year? We just don't know how to make it meaningful yet. And so that's one of the big challenges. It's not can we do the integration. It's what problems are we trying to solve in the first place, and then how do we do them so that they're usable?
So that's probably a longer conversation as well. So why don't, if you guys are able to stick around, I'd like to really thank our presenters here. Make sure you fill out your forms, and Informatica is at booth 509, and some of the Informatica employees will come up and be available here.